What if the very thing the town used to shame her became the reason a cowboy chose her with his whole heart? The whispers followed Catherine Zimmer through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek like stubborn shadows that would not fade. The spring sun of 1875 warmed the small Colorado town, but the words people threw behind her back felt colder than the harshest winter snow. They called her empty. They called her barren. They called her something to pity, something broken, something less. But Catherine walked with her chin high, her books pressed close to her chest, and her heart held together by quiet strength. At 26, she had lived through more than many twice her age. She had buried her husband Thomas 2 years earlier after a painful battle with pneumonia. She had endured 3 miscarriages before that, and she had survived the cruelty of a town that believed a woman's worth lived only in the children she could bear. "Morning, Miss Zimmer." Mr. Thornton called from the porch of his general store. His voice was kind, but Catherine still caught the pity in his eyes before he quickly looked away. She offered a polite nod and kept walking toward the small white schoolhouse at the edge of town. It was her refuge, her purpose, her way of mothering the world, even if she could never mother a child of her own. The schoolhouse door swung open before she reached it, and little Lily Peterson rushed toward her with bright blue eyes and bouncing braids. "Miss Zimmer, guess what? P says there's a new family moving to the ranch outside town. 5 children, and no ma." Catherine smiled at the child's excitement. 5? That's quite a lot. "Maybe they'll join us at school." "P says they will," Lily said proudly. "All 5 of them." Catherine's curiosity rose like a spark, catching, kindling, but she brushed it aside. It was probably nothing more than interest in new pupils. That evening, Catherine sat on her porch, watching the sun melt into gold across the mountains. Her small cottage stood slightly apart from the rest of the town, giving her quiet space, but separating her from others all the same. The loneliness usually felt peaceful. Tonight, it felt heavy. The next morning, as she watered the small garden Thomas had once planted for her, she saw a tall figure standing at her gate. The early light framed him like a painting. His hat was in his hands, his hair the color of pale wheat, his eyes the clear blue of summer sky. "Good morning, madam," he called politely. "I hope I'm not intruding. Name's Ethan Sawyer." Catherine brushed her apron and walked toward him. "Catherine Zimmer, you must be the newcomer with 5 children." His serious face broke into a warm smile. "News travels fast here." "It always does," she said with a soft laugh. "What brings you to Redemption Creek?" "A fresh start," he answered. "Kansas drought took everything. I bought the old Miller place. Heard Colorado had better land." He looked almost nervous as he added, "I also came about your school. My oldest is 12, then 10. Twins are 8, and my littlest is 6. Ma passed when Samuel was born." Catherine's heart tightened at the familiar ache of loss. "I'm very sorry. I'd be honored to have your children in my class." Ethan nodded, still twisting his hat. "Truth is, I need help before school starts. They're running wild while I'm fixing the ranch. Heard you might help, if you have time." "You're asking me to watch them?" she said with a small smile at his awkwardness. "Just for a few days," he rushed out. "I can pay." "No payment needed," Catherine said gently. "I'll help." The relief in his eyes was deep enough to touch her heart. The next morning, Catherine arrived at the ranch and walked straight into pure chaos. Jessie chased Charlotte with a book. The twins yelled from the chicken coop. Samuel sat in the dirt, drawing in the dust with a stick. Ethan came out of the barn, hair a mess, shirt dusty. "Thank goodness," he sighed. "I haven't had a quiet breath since sunrise." "I said I would come," she answered simply. Ethan called the children to introduce them, and they lined up with different expressions: curious, hesitant, shy, hopeful. Samuel instantly reached for Catherine's hand. "Are you gonna be our new mother?" he asked. Ethan nearly dropped his hat. "Samuel!" Catherine knelt to the little boy's height. "I'm here to help your papa and get to know you before school starts. Will you show me around?" Samuel beamed and tugged her forward. By the end of the day, Catherine knew every corner of the ranch and every spark of each child's personality. She helped Charlotte with reading, kept Jesse from climbing the roof, listened to the twins' wild stories, and held Samuel when he scraped his knee. Ethan watched her from a distance sometimes, an unreadable look in his eyes. When she was leaving, he walked her to her wagon. "You're a natural with them," he said quietly. "They're good children," she replied. "They just need steadiness and love." Ethan blew out a slow breath. "Some days I worry I can't give enough. Charlotte's too old for her age. Jesse tests every limit on Earth, and the twins, well, they're twins." "They're doing their best," Catherine said gently. Ethan nodded, his voice softer. "Having you here, it's the calmest they've been since Sarah died." Catherine's heart warmed at his words. The next day at the general store, she heard the whispers before she saw the faces. "Running off to that ranch every day. Desperate thing. Imagine chasing after a widow rower with 5 children. Though she'd be no real mother. She's barren after all." The words cut like sharp glass. Just then, Ethan stepped into the store. His eyes swept over the gossiping women, then landed on Catherine. "I was hoping to find you," he said firmly. "Charlotte needs help with her Sunday dress." His jaw tightened as he helped Catherine outside. "People talk too much," he said, "and they're wrong." Catherine swallowed hard. "I'm used to it." "I'm not," Ethan answered. "And I won't let them speak about you that way." Something shifted between them, something quiet, something deep, a feeling Catherine hadn't felt in years. Hope. Catherine woke early the next morning, her heart still warm from Ethan's unexpected protectiveness. Redemption Creek might have mocked her for years, but one man's quiet defense had softened years of aching. She tried to push the feeling away as she prepared for school, yet every time she thought of Ethan's eyes, steady, certain, angry on her behalf, it stirred something she hadn't felt since before Thomas died. When she arrived at the schoolhouse, the Sawyer children sat waiting on the steps, legs swinging, lunch pails in hand. Charlotte rose first, her movements already carrying the grace of a young lady. "Good morning, Miss Zimmer," she said politely. "Good morning, sweetheart," Catherine replied. Jesse tried to hide behind Charlotte's back, pretending he hadn't spent the last 2 days following Catherine like a shadow. The twins waved enthusiastically, and Samuel rushed forward to latch onto her skirt like she belonged to him. "You're sitting with us at church again tomorrow, right?" Samuel asked. Catherine kneeled before him. "If your father wants me to." "P wants you to," Samuel said matter-of-factly. "He looks at you with his soft eyes." Catherine blinked in surprise. "His soft eyes?" Samuel nodded firmly. "Those eyes he never used before you came." Before she could respond, the church bell rang from across town and class began. The day passed quickly. Lessons, laughter, the occasional scuffle, and before long the Sawyer children were waving goodbye as Ethan arrived to take them home. He caught Catherine's eye for a brief moment, his soft smile saying what the town's gossip never could. Sunday morning brought its own challenges. Redemption Creek's tidy white church filled with neighbors and whispers. Catherine wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back loosely. She sat beside the Sawyer children, Samuel climbing onto her lap the instant she settled. When Ethan arrived, clean-shaven, neatly dressed, smelling of pine soap, the murmurs rose. Well, he didn't take long. He should choose better. She can't give him what he needs. She's broken, quote. Catherine's chest tightened, but before she could slip away, Ethan sat beside her and placed his hand gently at the small of her back. The touch was warm, careful, and protective. After the service, Reverend Phillips approached with a too polite smile. "Lovely to see you all together," he said, "though some in town have mentioned propriety." Ethan's smile never faltered, but his voice dropped. "Miss Zimmer is helping with my children, and that is all anyone needs to say on the matter." Reverend Phillips cleared his throat quickly. Of course. Ethan's hand stayed on Catherine's back as they left the church, his touch saying what words couldn't. "You are not alone." The following week deepened the bond between Catherine and the children. She spent evenings at the ranch helping Charlotte learn sewing, guiding Jesse gently but firmly through arithmetic, listening to the twins, big imaginations, and reading Samuel to sleep beside the warm glow of a lantern. Every night, Ethan walked her to her wagon, sometimes speaking quietly about Kansas, sometimes just standing with her in the comfort of shared silence. Each moment made Catherine's chest flutter in a way she thought she'd forgotten how to feel. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, Ethan finally spoke the question he'd been holding. "Catherine," he began softly, "would you consider coming to the Harvest Festival with me? Not just with the children, but with me." Her breath caught. "Are you asking to court me, Ethan?" He looked away for a moment, almost shy. "If you would let me." A warm, trembling smile grew on her face. "I'd be honored." The Harvest Festival arrived on a crisp autumn evening. Lanterns lit the town square, music drifted through the air, and tables overflowed with food from every family in Redemption Creek. Catherine wore her best dress, the deep blue one Charlotte insisted she wear. Ethan saw her from across the square, and his steps slowed as if he'd forgotten how to breathe. "Catherine," he whispered, taking her hand, "you look like the answer to every prayer I didn't know I had." They danced under the lantern light. Ethan's hand rested warmly against her back, his eyes never leaving hers. For the first time in years, Catherine allowed herself to feel seen, not as broken, not as empty, but as a woman worth loving. But not everyone agreed. Near the refreshment table, Agatha Fowler approached with two other women, their smiles sharp as knives. "You're making quite the display," Agatha said. "A widow rower desperate, I suppose." "I beg your pardon?" Catherine asked calmly, though her chest tightened. "Well," Agatha continued, inspecting Catherine as if she were spoiled fruit, "we all know you can't have children, and Ethan has 5 who need raising. Seems unwise for him to choose someone who can't." Before she could finish, a small voice cut through the air. "Miss Zimmer," Charlotte said, appearing at Catherine's side with perfect timing, "P says it's time for that special dance you promised him." Catherine played along. "Of course. Please excuse me, ladies." As they walked away, Charlotte whispered, "P says those women don't know anything. He says you're perfect as you are." Tears stung Catherine's eyes. "Did he really say that?" Charlotte nodded. "And he said people are just jealous because he looks at you like you're the only person on earth." Later that night, Ethan walked Catherine home. The children slept in the back of the wagon, the stars bright overhead. When the house came into view, he finally spoke the words sitting heavy on his heart. "Catherine," he said softly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." She turned to him, breath trembling. "Ethan." "You don't need to say anything now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know." But she reached for his hand, her voice gentle and sure. "I love you too." Under the moonlit sky, they shared their first kiss. Sweet, steady, full of promise. Both knew their lives would never be the same. The days after the Harvest Festival felt brighter than any Catherine had known in years. The town still whispered, but Catherine hardly heard them anymore. Ethan's quiet love and the children's affection wrapped around her like a warm blanket. For the first time since Thomas's death, she allowed herself to believe she could build a future again. Their courtship moved gently but with certainty. Catherine spent evenings at the ranch, helping the children with chores and lessons. She read to Samuel every night before bed. She listened to Charlotte's worries about growing up. She managed Jesse's wild streak with patience. She laughed at the twins. Endless imagination. Each child carved a place in her heart, until she could no longer tell where her love for them ended and where her love for Ethan began. One cool October evening, Ethan took Catherine on a walk along the creek behind the ranch. The water sparkled under the fading sunlight, and fallen leaves gathered in little clusters along the bank. "Catherine," Ethan said, stopping near a large smooth stone, "I know life has not been gentle with you, but I want to spend the rest of mine making sure it becomes gentle now." She raised her eyes to him just as he dropped to one knee. He held out a simple silver ring, his voice steady. "Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my friend, my heart, and the mother to my children in every way that matters?" Tears filled Catherine's eyes. She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the moment she never believed she would have again. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan, I will." The wedding took place 2 weeks later under a sky so clear it looked painted. The aspen trees behind the church stood blazing gold in the autumn light. Catherine wore a cream dress that Charlotte and Abigail had helped sew. The boys wore clean shirts and nervous grins. Samuel proudly held Catherine's hand as he walked her down the aisle. "I give her," he announced boldly when the Reverend asked the question. "Me and Charlotte and Jesse and Abby and Andrew. All of us." Laughter warmed the church, and Catherine's eyes filled with tears again. Ethan's vows were simple but full of feeling. "I will love you in every season, Catherine Zimmer Sawyer," he said, "and I will be grateful every day that God brought you to us." Quote, "When the Reverend told them to kiss, Ethan's kiss was tender, steady, full of promise. The Sawyer children cheered so loudly that even the stern Reverend Phillips laughed. Life settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. Catherine continued teaching while also caring for her new family. The children adjusted well. Charlotte asked Catherine for advice about dresses and reading. Jesse tried harder at school because he wanted Catherine to be proud. The twins included her in their grand imaginary adventures. Samuel followed her everywhere, always holding her hand. Some in town tried to keep gossip alive. Agatha Fowler made comments under her breath about barren brides, but Ethan shut those down quickly. "A family is built with love," he said one morning at the general store, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not just blood." Slowly, the whispers faded. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the town, and the nights grew long and cold. One evening, as Catherine prepared supper, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She leaned on the table until it passed. For days, she ignored the strange tiredness, thinking it must be the winter chill. But when she began waking sick each morning, a fragile hope stirred inside her. She said nothing until she visited Dr. Morgan alone one frosty morning. She sat on the examination table with trembling hands, prepared for heartbreak, but the doctor looked at her with astonishment. "Mrs. Sawyer, you're expecting." Catherine froze. She felt her heart stop, then race, then stop again. "I can't be." The doctor in Denver said, "Your body has its own wisdom," Dr. Morgan said gently. "You're about 6 weeks along. We must be cautious, but this pregnancy appears healthy." Catherine covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She walked home with shaking hands pressed to her stomach. She waited until the children were asleep that night before telling Ethan. He stared at her in shock. Then joy filled his face so fully it looked like sunlight. "Catherine," he breathed, pulling her into his arms. "A miracle, our miracle." Fear still lived in her eyes. "I'm terrified, Ethan." "I know," he whispered. "But you're not alone. We'll walk every step together." They told the children the next morning. Samuel cheered. The twins danced in circles. Jesse puffed his chest proudly. Charlotte cried and hugged Catherine tightly. "I knew you were our real mother," she whispered. The months passed gently. When Catherine grew weak and bed rest became necessary, the family stepped in with love. Charlotte managed the house. Jesse fed the animals. The twins helped with cooking. Samuel sat beside Catherine's bed every night, reading in his tiny voice until she fell asleep. In early June of 1876, after a long and painful labor, Catherine brought a baby girl into the world. Her cry was strong. Her tiny fists waved in the air. Ethan wept openly. "She's perfect," he said, kissing Catherine's forehead, "just like her mother." They named her Elizabeth Sarah Sawyer. That afternoon, the 5 older children crept into the room. Samuel climbed onto the bed beside Catherine and peered at the baby with wide, gentle eyes. "She's mine, too?" he whispered. Catherine smiled warmly. "She's ours, all of ours." Quote. Charlotte touched the baby's cheek softly. "Thank you for being our mother, for her and for us." Ethan wrapped his arm around Catherine as the children gathered close. Outside, Redemption Creek hummed with life, but inside the Sawyer home, a family, now complete, celebrated the miracle they never thought they would have. Catherine looked at each beloved face, her husband, their 5 spirited children, and the tiny miracle in her arms, and whispered, "Thank you for making me your own." Ethan kissed her forehead. Always and forever, my love. Always and forever.